Well, good day, everyone. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and we are back yet again. What's 2 years and 3 months now, Damo, mate? How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Getting older, But that's okay. Yeah, we're all good. Been a big week, but that's all right. We're back and a good guest tonight, mate. Well played.
Basically, we've got my beautiful partner Miriam on the show tonight, and there's a
Hang
couple
on,
of
that's
reasons.
my bit.
Sorry? Oh,
That's my
sorry.
bit.
Okay, Damo, you introduce her.
I will. So tonight we have Ben's beautiful partner Miriam on the show. So the thing is, though, this has all been a scam, Miriam. We've been Schultzy's been recruiting you for the last 10 years, nearly getting close. 9 years? Just so you can appear on Two Ordinary Cops
Yeah,
podcast.
pretty
So
much.
yeah, that's how it's been.
Yeah.
But yes, tonight we that's funny. That's staying in. I like it. So yes, tonight we have Ben's beautiful partner Miriam, who is in a little bit different to when we had Ema on, my partner, who my wife, who explained what was going on while we were in the job. Miriam, you guys got together when Ben was already out of the job, and still in the service, but no longer working. So that gives a bit of a unique perspective. And the beauty of it, you're a multifaceted guest because you've got a couple of pretty wild stories that have occurred to you, and it relates to Australian and New Zealand policing too.
Yes, I do.
Welcome, Miriam. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a
That's the
little
bit where
anxious
you
now
talk.
after that leaving. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yes. Thank you for the intro. And yes, I did meet Ben just after he officially went on leave without pay. So he was still a cop, but he wasn't doing any cop work. He was deciding on his future. So I met him at that point of decision, I guess. And we actually met at a wedding in New Zealand and just started traveling around Australia together. And I'm hopeful that sort of helped him with his process and his decision making on whether to stay or go, and if he was going to leave, what sort of decisions he'd make for his future. And he included me in that future, which was pretty good as well. So
Yeah, so far, yeah, it's been good.
yeah. Trying to score points with your listeners, you see. So
Yeah, nice. No,
yeah.
fantastic. What do you got, Schultzy?
Yeah, well, mate, it could be a little bit embarrassing. Miriam basically knows all my dark and dirty, dark and dirty. Yeah, mate, and there's actually a few funny stories we're going to tell later on. But, mate, I think first we'll get you to introduce, because Miriam lived in Christchurch before we got together, and she moved over to Australia. And she was actually in the massive earthquakes that happened over there. 2010, I believe, sweetheart. And you've got a
Yes.
pretty incredible story. And I think the thing that really resonates with a lot of first responders who are listening to this podcast is the fact that every jurisdiction in Australia came over to help out during those earthquakes.
Yes,
So,
that's right, and that still actually makes me tear up a little bit. Just seeing everybody there and helping out, because being a part of New Zealand, it's so far away from the rest of the world, even from Australia. And we quite often send our first responders to other countries for fires and earthquakes and all that sort of thing. And it was, you never expect that you're going to be on the receiving end of that. So it's still very emotional for me to talk about that side of things, and knowing that they were there helping out with the investigation, for when people were killed, and they were rescuing people at the beginning, and just doing protection of the city for a long time, because after the quake it was cordoned off, so we couldn't even go into the centre of our own city. So the police and the first responders and some of the army as well were all there, just protecting our city and making sure that people couldn't go in and get hurt. So they were there for quite some time. I presume they just came in different shifts. I'm not sure how it works, but I don't think the people of Christchurch will ever forget the great service that these people did, because it felt like we had the quakes, we were just sort of starting to get our head around the fact that it had happened, and then the next minute there were people from Australia, they were there immediately. That's what it felt like for us. And I'm not sure I can speak for everybody in Christchurch, but I know personally I was so grateful that they were there, and they really did help out our people. So yeah, I'm a bit emotional about it, even talking about it now. So yeah, it's just like they actually even published a book about it in Christchurch, and it was all about the different first responders who came over and showed them doing different tasks around the city, and it even had pictures of their dogs helping out, trying to find people in the rubble. So I think that book really quietly honours them, and I think everybody in Christchurch should own that book and just remember it from time to time, because yeah, our people, but especially the people from Australia and beyond, really, really did help us, and yeah, we'll never forget it. But yeah, I'm getting emotional again. Sorry.
Yeah, we're probably going to keep doing that, because Miriam, I'll take you back even further. So tell me about that day.
So there's actually 2 days. So the first day, the first big earthquake we had was September the 4th, 2010. And we had an earthquake, I don't know, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was a big one. It was about a 7 on the Richter scale. So quite violent shaking. And, you know, you're in bed, it's dark. All the power goes out, so it becomes even darker. It's very noisy. I actually thought a plane was going to crash on the house, so that gives you an idea of what the noise was like. And the stupid thing was, I was with my previous partner who had a few set ideas about things, and one of the things he had a set idea about was he thought waterbeds were the best beds ever. So we were asleep in bed in a waterbed, and a huge earthquake occurs. So the waterbed sort of moves with our body movement normally, but it also was trying to move with the movements of the house. So you can imagine how difficult it is to get out of a waterbed in an earthquake. It's one of the more difficult tasks that you can imagine. And then you're trying not to panic because you don't know what's going on. So I got out of bed, managed to walk into the wardrobe because I couldn't even find myself in the room. I didn't know where I was, which is probably the best place to be in an earthquake, because I was surrounded by soft things, but I was in a sturdy environment. And then, of course, a few seconds later, it was all over, and we're just like, well, what the hell was that? So that was the first one. But not many people know about that one because there was very little damage in the city. Some of the suburbs and my hometown got a lot of damage, but Christchurch itself had sort of minor, well, depending on the suburb, some had damage, some didn't. And then in February 2011, so that was just after the Brisbane floods, I believe, that's when we had the one that you guys know about and you guys all came to. So that was in the middle of the day, around lunchtime, February, so it was relatively warm for Christchurch. People were out and about in the city. And that was a smaller earthquake on the Richter scale, but it was centred very close to the city, and it was very shallow, so it did a lot of damage to buildings and infrastructure. And of course, everybody was at work doing their thing. There was a half day at school, so just before the earthquake, all the kids had come out of school and they were milling around in the city. So it was a terrible time. So that one I felt was worse because it did more damage to the city, and I think it had more of an emotional toll on us than the first one, because I think the first one we felt like we dodged a bullet, but the second one, it felt like the things had come home to roost, and we were in trouble this time. That's what it felt like. And that's, we lost lives, we lost buildings, and we lost access to our city for a really long time after that. So that's probably a bit of a nutshell, and I guess pretty much everybody in Christchurch who experienced it will have a different story to tell depending on where they were situated. And but for me, I was right in the middle of the city, which is where the worst part of it was, apparently, so which I didn't know at the time. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Do you mind cracking the nutshell open? Can you tell us more about
what would you like to know? Curses. I was trying to keep my little nutshell there. So what would you like to know? And I'll try and answer it the best I can.
Do you want to just describe, because what we do here is, as you know, that we just normalise policing, but this is about normal human experience. So we've got a very unique opportunity here to hear what it was like for somebody who was in the middle of Christchurch during probably one of New Zealand's worst ever natural disasters. So do you just want to describe from your point of view, just a normal person going about their day, can you just tell us what that entailed?
Okay, so I was at work in the centre of the city, and I was working in a department store. It had about 3 levels, and I was on the ground floor, so we had a basement, and then there was another floor above us. It was a Tuesday, and the reason I remember it was a Tuesday was actually my day off, and I got called into work. So I didn't get breakfast, and I just went straight into work, started my day, and I had 9 minutes until it was my lunchtime, and that's when the earthquake hit. So I was already quite hungry and cranky by that time, as you can imagine. So I remember being a little bit casual about the earthquake because it didn't feel as bad as the previous one. So I was standing there and going, yeah, it's not that bad. Yeah, it's a bit shaky. And I was trying to work out in my head how strong it was, because that was our habit after the first one. Like, we're trying to guess how strong the earthquakes were, because of course you have so many aftershocks. So I was standing there going, oh yeah, it's not really a big one, really, probably okay. And then I looked out the window and there were just people everywhere. It was dusty. A bit of the building across the road had kind of fallen, the facade had fallen off the building. And that's when I started thinking, hey, this is really serious. This is really, really going to be bad. And the other thing that happened was all the people in the basement were very, very suddenly up on our floor, because the basement apparently had started to flood just in that little moment where the earth shook. So, and then also the other thing you could hear on the floor above, there was a lot of china and glassware for sale. And you could hear that just going clink, 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 and all breaking and crashing onto the ground. And that's actually a scarier sound than anything else, because it's very clear and something is breaking and you think, okay, these things are breaking, so it's a very serious situation that we're in. Just china breaking, it's quite a special sound when there's a lot of it. So we thought, okay, we know we're in a really safe building. It had been earthquake strengthened and work done to it since the first earthquake, so we thought the best thing we can do is stay in this building. We had a lot of customers in there who were tourists and they hadn't experienced this before, and they were quite panicky. So we're trying to keep them calm so they wouldn't sort of rush out into the street and get hit by any debris or anything. So we were able to do that for a while, and that, I don't know how long we were in there, but then a police officer came in and said, yeah, you've got to go, you've got to evacuate the city. And so that's the next thing. We went outside, we stayed in the middle of the road away from the buildings, and we essentially had to walk out of the city because I'd come in on the bus and I didn't have a vehicle, which is probably a good thing actually, because you know what a traffic jam occurs in an emergency situation. You get massive traffic jams, which is in fact what occurred in Christchurch. Everybody tried to leave in their vehicle at the same time, and it was just gridlock. So I was a little bit lucky because my uncle also worked at the same department store as I did, and we were there together. So we made a plan together that we were going to get out, and we had to find my aunt who worked on the other side of the city, and she had the vehicle. So we thought we'll find her, and because we were a little naive and stupid, we thought, oh, we'll just send her a text and see if she'll come and get us. But of course, all the telecom, all the mobiles were out, most of the electricity was out. So we thought, okay, what are we going to do now? So we thought, we'll go, she'll probably try and come and get us. So we'll go to a main road and stand there, and then we'll just keep trying to get hold of her. And eventually we did, and she said she'd meet us almost exactly where we were. So we're standing there, and all this time, the earth is still moving because we've had the big shake, but there are aftershocks. So you're just wandering around in the city, and the ground's not stable under you. So you've just got to remember, you're walking around, you're probably safe, but you're not as safe as you were yesterday. And that's something that it took my mind a while to get my head around, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty safe, but I'm in a situation where I could get hurt or injured or be in a situation where that happens to somebody else, and I'm not a hero, I'm not a first responder or anything like that. I'm just a person going about my day. But yeah, your thinking changes a little bit. But the other thing, of course, is you are pumped full of adrenaline. You know, this is an emergency situation. All chaos is around you. There's people panicking, there's people who are calm, there's people in all kinds of states, all trying to get out of the city at the same time. There's a few horrific things that you guys would have seen every day. You know, there were a few deaths in the city. There was a bus that was damaged and there were people in it. And I think the people that saw that were a little bit traumatized by that sight, which you can imagine. You've seen that sort of thing before. But anyway, going back to my aunt, we eventually found her, which is an absolute miracle in itself, because in Christchurch at the time, it seemed every single car in the city was the colour grey, including my aunt's, and they were all together in one spot trying to get out of the city, and we had to find a grey car in a sea of grey cars. And by some miracle, we did find her. So that's good. We managed to get out of the city, but because of the damage to the land in and around the city, we couldn't just drive home. We kept going, finding detours. There were holes in the road. There was flooding. There was liquefaction. There was crashes. There was all kinds of things. So it took us, I don't know how long to get out of the city, well over an hour for maybe a 20-minute drive. And we thought we don't have enough fuel in the car to get home. So we had to make a decision to abandon the car and walk the rest of the way. And that's what we ended up doing. We abandoned the car, got out, and we just walked in single file because we couldn't trust the ground beneath us, because it had a surface of liquefaction, which is a grey, wet, moist substance that comes out from under the ground when the earth shakes sometimes. So you couldn't see the surface of the ground. You were just walking through this liquefaction, so you didn't know if you were going to strike a hole or a void, or a crack which you'd trip over. So you just couldn't see what was under your feet the same way as you could normally. So we walked like this for probably an hour maybe, and we still were not really close to home. And I'm wearing high heels, by the way, in all of this, which was quite stunningly uncomfortable. And I remember distinctly, we came to a fork in the road, and we could go straight ahead or we could go left. And both ways were covered in flood water and muck and debris and all kinds of stuff, because the further we got to the coast, because we were heading east, which is towards the coast, the worse the damage was to the land in particular. So we had to make a call on which way to go. Both roads would have got us home, but we had to make the right call there, and we had absolutely nothing to go on. So we chose one, and we were fortunate that it was the right one. And we got home, well, not to my house, we got to my aunt's house, my aunt and uncle's house, about probably just after 10 p.m. So the earthquake occurred at 11:51 a.m. and we got home at around 10, give or take. And I didn't even know if I had a home as well. That's the other thing. So we were walking to my aunt and uncle's home, assuming it would still be there, which it was. It had a lot of damage. We could barely even open the door to get in. There was just grey muck, liquefaction everywhere, and it was very, very deep. In fact, there was a blind spot. My aunt actually fell into a hole, quite deeply into a hole, and we had to haul her out. So that was pretty bad. But at this point, I still didn't know if I had a home to go to, if my partner was all right, my family were all right, because there's just nothing, no news, nothing at all. You just had no idea. All you had to do was just focus on the small tasks ahead of you. So one foot in front of the other, then getting to the house, working out what to do once you're in the house. We had to find something to eat, and then we couldn't cook it, of course, because there's no electricity. So we found a little gas cooker that they'd used when they used to go camping, so we got that going, and we're like, oh, we don't really want to use it because it feels a bit unsafe. And then we ended up making little sandwiches on this little gas cooker, and we found an old radio and stuck some batteries in it. We managed to get onto the national radio network and find out what was going on around us, because we had no idea really what was going on. That's the sort of quite disturbing thing. Like, you're in the middle of an event and you still have no idea what's going on. It was very peculiar. So that was the day of the quake, and we were still continuing to have aftershocks during that time as well. So all of us, we just kind of snuggled together in the living room at my aunt and uncle's house, and we didn't leave each other for a second at all. We just wanted to make sure that we were together the whole time. That's, day one. There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm emotional again, sorry.
Well, you're allowed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It happened in 2011. It's now 2026, and a lot of the details escape your memory, which is part of your healing process. But you can still go back there quite easily, can't you? So, yeah, it does affect you from time to time. Yeah. So
you finished off there, and you said that was day one. Well,
day one.
There was no. This wasn't a one-day event. The effects
No.
is probably this day being felt. So, Schultzy, unless you got something else, do you mind just explaining what happened then?
Okay, so we had a fairly rough night, as you can imagine, because we're a little tense and the adrenaline was still there, but it was wearing off. So we're tired and tense at the same time, if that makes sense. But we did get some sleep in between shocks. And then the next morning, we had a couple of things we had to do. We had to find my cousin, who's in a kind of a location similar to an NDIS situation. We couldn't get through to them. So our first, call of duty, if you like, was to try and find her. But we also had to go out and help clean up the street outside my aunt and uncle's house, because it was just full of mud and muck, and I dare say a bit of sewerage and other horrible things. And that stuff was just it's almost, because it had dried a bit, it was like powdered concrete, so it was hard but powdery at the same time. It's just, nightmare to dig. But the whole street was out there just with whatever tools we had, and we were just trying to clear the guttering so water could go up and down the gutter. And if people needed to go in and out, we were able to clear a bit of the road so people could drive, because it was just a lot of damage to the land and infrastructure in that particular area that we were in. So I think it was a Tuesday that the earthquake occurred, and we found my cousin on the Thursday. So you two are both parents, so you can imagine what it's like not knowing where your child is in a situation like that. So that was a very, very emotional time, but we found her eventually. We knew that the people caring for her would have moved them somewhere safe, but we had no way of contacting them, and we didn't know where they would be. So, but it worked out in the end, and she was happy and healthy, and it was quite an exciting event for her, I think, because she didn't quite understand the severity of it, but she was certainly glad to see us when we finally found her on the Thursday, so you can imagine. But most of the things that happened afterwards involve tidying up. But every single person on that side of town, I reckon, had to spend time with a shovel and a wheelbarrow and just dig up that liquefaction rubbish from their yards. It's pretty much, we went into work mode after that. And again, still got aftershocks going on as well. So for me, day 2, 3, 4, and 5 is cleaning up. I did eventually get to my property, the property I was living in with my partner at the time, and it was immaculate. It was like nothing had happened. It was probably 15 minutes drive away, and there was no damage that we could discern. And then I had a rental property around the corner, again 5 minutes away from my partner's place, and that was damage central. So there were just pockets of damage in the city, and then there'd be areas when it was like nothing had ever happened. It's very strange because I thought the worst for both properties, but only one of them was really damaged. Unfortunately, it was my one. But so I had to go into cleaning up mode there. It's quite a surreal experience because you go to the house and you look at it and you think, oh yeah, that's all right. And then you try and open the door and you realise you can't. So you've got to find another way to get in. You get into your house and you go, oh yeah, it looks all right. And then you realise the floor is sloping. And you think, well, that's not normal. So you think, okay, so there's probably a lot of damage to the foundation of my property, which is very bad news for my property in general. So you have to get your head around that. So you go from a adrenaline, just getting from A to B, very task-oriented frame of mind to, okay, now I've got to think of the long-term things. I've got to spend a lot of time fixing up my property. It might not be able to be salvaged, I don't know. I've got to get rid of all the liquefaction from the outside of the property, and it had leaked into the house a little bit, so we had to get rid of all that as well. So it was just work after that. The other thing, of course, is they kept the city closed, so nobody could go back. So if you had a car parked in the city, you were just out of luck. You couldn't go back in and get it. We did try a couple of weeks later to get my friend's car, and the police were just not having it. No, you cannot get that. It's still too dangerous. So they did keep pretty good tabs on the city, and they were not... they wouldn't make any exception for any person, which is probably good. You know, they had our safety first and foremost. But so that was a bit of a messy description of what happened afterwards. But I'm telling you, it was just weeks and weeks of cleaning up, making sure everybody's okay, and then dealing with insurance companies, which is a whole epic in itself later on. So I won't get into that because... rage will probably be my next emotion if I go into that. So probably thought I'll leave that one. But so it's sort of hard. It's psychologically, it was very hard not being able to go into your own city. You don't really realise how much it's a part of you, like your hometown or your home city. You don't understand it until you can't go there. And I found that really difficult, and I think a lot of others did as well. And you know, it was fenced off. You couldn't really see what was going on. You knew a lot of buildings were either halfway down, had come down, or were about to be pulled down for safety reasons. So first of all, you couldn't go there, which is a good thing because it was dangerous, but you didn't know what it was going to be like when you were finally allowed to get back in there as well. And there were a lot of lives lost in that earthquake. Most of them were in one building, which failed spectacularly, but most of the other buildings lasted long enough to allow people to get out safely. So I'm very grateful that I lived in this particular city when this disaster happened, because some places in the world a lot more people would have been killed, I think, just because of the way the building codes are and were. So I still feel lucky with the whole experience. I'll be honest with you, I'd rather that I had never experienced it, to be fair, but it brought out the best of people. You know, the community came together quite a lot, and as I said earlier, just the outpouring of help and support we got from you guys in particular, but also from the rest of the world as well. It was oh my God, I still can't find words to articulate how it made me feel to have that kind of help and support in our little tiny corner of the world. It was amazing. So I'd like to thank you, not you guys personally, because I'm pretty sure you weren't there, but all your friends and colleagues that went over. I was so grateful, and I would say thank you every day. If I could meet the people that went over, I'd probably kiss their feet because they were just amazing, 100%. So thank you.
So the Northern Territory Police actually sent 11 people over in response to that. and I know there are obviously just general police heading over to do general duties in Christchurch, just given the need for that number of people. But we also sent specialist disaster victim identification teams over as well, or members who
Yeah.
were trained in DVI. So, for those who don't know, I think we've mentioned it previously, but for those who don't know, disaster victim identification is a forensic style of policing where it's very scientific. It's actually identifying bodies that are not immediately identifiable, and there was a big need for
Yeah.
that in
Yeah, there
Christchurch.
was. Mm.
So I know that I spoke to one of the girls who went over there, and she's told me some. I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but she told me some things, and she'd seen other things in the Victorian bushfires, and she goes, it was same, but completely different. It was you can't you know it's a person, but you can't recognise it. There's no one would be able to recognise that person. We know it's
Yeah.
a human. That's it. And she said that's what you're working with, and the one thing that was a real sort of a thing that made him emotional about that trip was because it was every single jurisdiction, all 8 police forces. That is all 7 Australian police, sorry, all 8 police forces from Australia, plus the New Zealand police, plus the New Zealand
Yeah.
military, plus the Australian military. There was just such a, and there was other countries involved as well.
Yeah, there were.
So do you
Yeah.
want to talk about that? Like, what are your memories of who was there doing what?
So it was a bit difficult for me to describe this one, mainly because a lot of their work, as you say, was forensic, which I was obviously not a part of. And they were doing, prior to that work, they were still doing rescue operations as well. They did keep that going for quite some time, if I recall. I think they were really desperate to make sure that they could get everybody out that was alive, and also locate everybody that had passed to the best of their ability as soon as they could. I do recall there were a lot of dogs there as well, obviously. And of course the Australians were there very quickly. The others obviously took a bit longer to come. We were lucky that our airport was deemed okay quite early on, otherwise it would have been a bit more of a logistical nightmare. If I do recall correctly, I believe the New Zealand Navy was actually nearby, just by massive stroke of luck, so they were able to help out at the port of Christchurch, which is a little town called Littleton, and that got a lot of damage. So I think it was probably quite good that they were there, and I think it was absolute stroke of luck that they were there. Where on the day of, I do recall seeing quite a few police in the city just doing their thing. That would have been the New Zealand police, because you guys wouldn't have arrived yet. So they were just doing stuff that's probably normal for you, just crowd control. They were helping dig people out from underneath bits of building or cars, and they were also checking vehicles to make sure there's nobody in them and injured. A cop came quite close to the building that I was in, and I think they put some injured people in the police car and took them to safety. Somebody got injured in a door. They were trying to go through a door in a bit of a panic, and they got injured leaving, which that happens in natural disasters. And then I think a lot of them ended up in the city just doing patrol, checking building to building for survivors, checking the safety of the houses with engineers as well, I believe. And then they were out in the suburbs looking for people and designating if the houses were safe. But unfortunately, because I'm not in that field, I wasn't able to really see them in action. But from a person living in a disaster zone, knowing they were there, it's very, I'm not sure if comforting is the right word, but you just feel like, okay, we can focus on what we need to do now, because these people are here and they're doing the hard stuff. They are doing the things that would break the rest of us. That's what they're doing. So again, I'm sorry I can't really tell you much more about it, because I was not involved in it, which is definitely a good thing. So, but again, for me, it's the fact that they were there and they were doing things, and we, particularly with the Australians, you guys are very well, you're pretty much the same as us, which will probably get me in trouble saying that. So we knew that you'd be doing the right things. Yeah. I'm in trouble now. Just turn it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we knew you understood our culture and a lot better than some of the other countries as well, and so we could trust you, 100% to do the right thing by us. So. Again, I didn't really see what they were doing because we were shut out of the city essentially. So, but we knew they were there and what they had to do.
Well, sweetheart, I think I can speak for everybody in Australia when we say New Zealand is our favourite state of Australia. So.
That always goes down well in New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in trouble now, my friend.
When did you first start seeing those different coloured uniforms? When do you remember going, geez, they're Australian?
Again, it was well afterwards because a lot of them, I think, were in the city, and we couldn't go in there at all. But we knew they were there. I also encountered they brought engineers over as well to help assess a lot of the buildings and houses. So the engineer that assessed my house, he was from Melbourne, and he was fantastic. So not a first responder, so it's a little bit different. But it sort of made me aware that Australia were not only sending first responders, they were sending anybody they could think of that could help. And we needed engineers to do a lot of assessments because New Zealand's a small country, so the proportion of engineers that we have is pretty low. So we needed those people over as well. But in terms of police officers, I saw the New Zealand police very early on in the piece because they were in the same environment that I was in. But you really just caught glimpses of the other first responders because we'd go into the city and sort of try and look through the barriers as much as we could because I think we needed to really see, and you could see a few of them in different locations, and you could recognise the flag on or the insignia on some of their uniforms. So we go, oh, there's the Aussies over there, and that one I think might be from New South Wales because we just couldn't really see or engage with them as much. So I'd love to be able to answer your question more fully, but again, we just we weren't privy to it at all. But yeah, so I can't give you the insider knowledge on that, unfortunately. But yeah, they were there, and they helped. Sorry.
Yeah, how long was it until you felt some sense of normality?
Sorry, could you repeat that? You just cut out a bit.
How long was it from the time of the actual earthquake itself until you felt a level of normality?
I don't know. Years, I think, honestly. The first year it was chaos. We had, in July, we had another earthquake event with, corresponding aftershocks. So we had to go through the whole routine again of cleaning up all the liquefaction and clearing the roads and, everything we'd done in February we had to do again. And that broke a lot of us because we thought we'd finished doing all of that and we assumed that the aftershocks we got would just diminish. But yeah, we just had two massively awful ones mid-year. And I also believe that year we had snow as well, which is a little bit unusual for Christchurch. Now, snow is snow, but when your buildings are full of holes, snow is a really bad thing to have. So in the first year, it was busy. You had so many things to do. But first year, second year, I would say it took me at least 3 years. I can't speak for anybody else. Just things started getting back to normal, but then I remember I had to go into the edge of the city to the bus station to catch a bus. And of course the bus station, the original one, was gone. It had been torn down and it was just not there anymore. And there was just a flat bit of ground where buildings used to be, and that was the new bus station. So it was just a bit of ground, little parking spots for the buses put on it. And so it was me, and I was just sitting there, and I could hear this kind of flappy sort of sound in the background, and I thought, what the hell is that? And there was a building still in the zone that had been cordoned off, and it was empty, but the windows were broken. It was a curtain flapping against the window frame on about the third or fourth floor of this building. And the city was so quiet, I could actually hear that. And that freaked me out on the whole other level, because the city was dead. And that was the first time it really hit me that the city was gone. The city that I knew was gone, and something else would probably appear later on. But just the silence, the deathly silence of that moment, it was very, very, it was horrific. I was quite perturbed by it, and I'm pretty calm in most situations, and I was so grateful when that bus came and just took me the hell out of there. So that was probably a year maybe afterwards that bus thing happened. And then you're dealing with insurance, you're dealing with work issues, because most of us, we had a work environment that was in the city, so we had to find temporary locations. So it's all practical stuff. You've got to do everything over again. And I think one of the places I worked for, we ended up with 3 different locations, and that's quite stressful in itself. You're unsettled because of the quakes and the aftermath, and then you're unsettled because you can't be settled in your job, and then you come home and a lot of people, their houses were damaged and they had to deal with that. And so it's just layers of stress all the time. And that's why I always come back to those first responders, because they gave us a level of comfort, because they were doing their job constantly during that time. And I know, the Australians eventually went back and the Americans went back, but somebody else would come, and then our guys would do things, and then it would become more of a, the council and various other people got involved with various things. But we just knew that the stuff that mattered was being taken care of. We probably complained about it all the time, but we knew it was being done. So we could focus on our ordinary everyday lives and try and get back to some version of normality. But for me, in answer to your question, it's probably about 3 years before I started feeling, okay, this is where I live now. I'm okay. I can do this. I can do that. I'm myself again. So outside of the insurance thing, because that took about 7 years to get right. So that's
I might just butt in there, sweetheart, if that's all right. So I basically rocked up in Christchurch about 6 years after, so 2017.
That's right.
And that's when that's when I first met Miriam. I remember driving in, and my brother and I were driving in, and we were sitting there going, bloody roadworks again, and we'd forgotten there was an earthquake, 6 years earlier. So this is a long time afterwards, and seeing in the city, a lot of the buildings have been destroyed. I think it was Wilson Parking had basically taken over all the rubble places and had their parking spots. And I remember you taking me around and showing me around the city and where you grew up.
Yeah, that's right.
You were calling them red zones. And I was calling them ghost suburbs, because and people have got to understand, you're seeing a street, there's signs, there's power lines, there's everything there, but not a house in sight.
Yeah.
And it's an eerie feeling to see these suburbs completely vacant of houses, but it's got every other bit of infrastructure. It was
surreal. So I grew up in a small town slightly to the north of Christchurch, and that got hit quite badly in the 2010 earthquake. So they went through a lot of the stuff that we went through a few months beforehand. So I was able to go and see my childhood home after that earthquake, and it was still standing, and the other houses in the street were there, but you were just looking at them. They'd been abandoned, obviously, because they were not safe, and they looked kind of like regular houses, and then you look a bit closer and you could see they're all on a bit of an angle or not quite right, and there's just nobody around again because everybody had gone. And there were I saw a couple of wild dogs in the street over from my childhood street, and there was a goat in the backyard of my old house, and like the wilderness, it was just starting to take over again. So all the houses in that part of my hometown, they were basically, the homeowners were bought out by the government to enable them to abandon the houses and make a fresh start somewhere else, because they designated that area as probably going to be problematic for a long time to come. So if you go there now, there's no houses at all. You'd never even know that houses had been there. The river has reclaimed its natural course. They've put in parks and all kinds of things that don't require dwelling. So it's actually a great place to visit if you don't have child memories of having a house there. So I think I took Ben there when it was a bit more wild, didn't I, Ben? So, or I should say Schultzy, so people know who I'm talking about. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's wild. I know it's a tough thing, but
funny.
Yeah, it's
it is.
I've heard things that I'd never heard before. Yeah, it would be extremely emotional. I can't imagine that, because I think Schultzy and I have told stories about things we've done, but we still had a foundation. There was still somewhere to go back to after you dealt with all that.
Yeah.
Whereas there was nowhere to go back to.
Yeah, 100%. And everybody in Christchurch that was there at the time will have a story. And some people's stories will be, oh, nothing really happened, because they were in an area where nothing really happened. But they're still affected because they still couldn't do a lot of the things in the city that they'd normally do. Their friends and family might have had to have abandoned their house and go somewhere else. So everybody was affected somehow in that quake. And you think about all the quakes that occur in the world, each year, each decade, whatever, there's probably millions of people that are affected by this, and you never really recover. You heal quite a lot, but you're never quite the person you were before these things happen, because they change you. These events change you, and I think you would have seen it as police officers, because you see people on the worst days of their lives quite often, and that person is going to be a different person from that day forward. And I think it's the same in a natural disaster as well. And again, that's why I keep saying I'm lucky, because I'm lucky I was in New Zealand and we had people to help us. We had government support. We had infrastructure and things in place to help us, so we wouldn't be destitute or starve to death or have to sleep out in the rain or anything like that. We were, in most cases. So I feel very grateful that I was in Christchurch, if that makes sense, even though I would have preferred not to have gone through this whole experience. But again, lucky. I feel lucky, to be honest. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, look, I reckon what we do, unless, Damo, you got any further questions in relation to that, we probably move on to a bit more of what you've noticed in me, which I think I think is quite interesting, because we talk a lot in this podcast about the transition out of police. You basically saw me, or you met me while I was still in and just leaving, but you saw what you've seen me now for 9 years. In that progression, and maybe you could just give us a rundown of what you've noticed.
Well, it was a little bit difficult for me because, of course, I think you're the first cop I really met in my entire life, like properly. So being a low crime person, so I didn't really interact with police that often. So I didn't really know what to expect with you, because of course you were still a cop, but you weren't being a cop when we met as well. You were sort of at a crossroads. But I found that there is a situation where I suddenly realised, hey, this guy is a cop, and it was quite an eye-opener for me, even though he'd been saying he was a cop all this time. So it was a New Year's Eve, I think it was, in Brisbane, the first year I moved over here, and we went into the city and we were standing on the bridge to watch some fireworks, and just about the rest of the city was on the bridges with us watching these fireworks, and Ben was just he was tense, he was very vigilant, he was looking around, and I thought, he's a police officer again, he's in crowd control mode, he's looking for situations, he's maybe looking for exits, he's looking at who's in the crowd and who might be a threat, and I could see him doing that, and I'd never seen that before, and it was quite a shock to me, because he hadn't been, like, I'd never seen him even in uniform or anything. He was just suddenly went into cop mode, and it just blew my mind. I'd never ever seen it before, and I thought, my goodness, even if he decides to leave the police, he's still going to be a police officer for the rest of his life. He's always going to check for danger and look for the situational awareness, I think you guys call it. He'll have that forever. And it was quite an eye-opener for me, because it actually triggered something in my brain that, yes, this guy is actually a police officer, because of course I'd never seen him be a police officer before. Wow. So it was quite incredible, and it was probably, for him, it was probably normal behavior. That's what he would have done in any time there was a crowd situation like that. But for me, it was certainly something new. It didn't frighten me or anything. It was just more suddenly the realization that he was still a cop, and he would continue to be like that. That's because that's not behavior that people who are not first responders or in the armed forces, we don't have that behavior. So it was actually quite fascinating for me to see it. And to be honest, it's a bit reassuring, because I knew if something went wrong, this guy had my back. I knew I would be safe as well. So kind of a bonus, really. So yeah. But it was fascinating.
It's funny you say that, because we don't sort of recognise it. But
yeah,
I've seen that so many times, and both of us, we've had conversations where we're out and it's been having a laugh out in public, and all of a sudden both of us will stop doing what we're doing, recognise some situation, and then both look at each other and we both realise that we've picked up on the same little thing.
Yeah.
And look around the table and no one else has picked it up, but we both got it. And it was that happens a bit. And just a little example there. Mum sort of said, "Oh, you've gone a bit quiet." I was at a wedding in Western Sydney last year, and my brother, and you said the armed forces there, which is relevant, because he's an infantry platoon commander, and he was also pretty quiet. And then we were at the front, and Mum said, "Oh, you want to be quiet? We're having a bit of fun." I said, "Oh yeah." I just explained what our brains were doing, and I said, "Hey Matty, where were the front two exits?" And he went, "Forward right about 15 metres, the door handle was on the left, forward left about this far, door handle was there." It was like, "How many people were behind you?" He goes, "Probably 60 behind me, the door was that far back, this far back." So what were your actions on? Because the military use a lot more formal speak than even police.
Yeah,
said,
for sure.
What were your actions on something behind us? He said, "I was going to grab Chloe, his girlfriend. I was going to make sure Mum and Dad were right. I'd decided the right exit, we were going that way, and I was going to go out and get hard cover." And I looked at Mum and said, "That went through my head as well." And she went, "What?" I was thinking how beautiful the bride looked. It was like, we weren't.
You probably hadn't noticed the bride yet.
I didn't even notice the bride. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. But that's sort of how I imagine Ben. Something similar would have been going through Ben's mind on the bridge. So it doesn't come up that often, but just every now and again he does sort of. I like to think he's zoned out because he's doing police thinking, but he might just be not listening to me. I'm not sure, but he just every now and again he will just go a bit quiet, and it's usually something very, very quick, and it's in a public place or something. And I think he's just scoping out the area a lot of the time, and it's brief. It's only maybe a couple of seconds, 20 seconds maybe, and that's it. Yeah, but you do see it, and sometimes I don't pick it up, but sometimes I think, oh, maybe he is in cop mode. That's what I call it.
You got me?
So, yep.
Picked it up at one stage. We're at South Bank, and we'd just gotten off the ferry, and I don't even know what I saw, but it was something. And I remember I just went all quiet and probably a bit tense. And you actually turned to me and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not, but I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I've seen something, and it's just created this response. I feel like there's a safety concern, and and that we went out for lunch, and I had to sit with my back to the wall watching
Yeah, yeah.
everybody.
Oh, I'd
That's
forgotten
yeah,
about that one. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So
I think the one I remember the most though is when the vote for the Voice was on, and we were just in just hanging around on near the voting booth, and a guy came up to Ben and
that
just started. When was that?
that was I'll just cut in there. That was
Yeah.
so it was after the Voice, and it was a council elections.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the guy that came up to you was talking about the vote for the Voice, and he was
Yes.
trying to provoke an argument with Ben for some reason, and he just kept niggling away at Ben and talking, and just getting not violently aggressive, but verbally he was just getting more and more aggressive. Um, and I think I could see Ben. He was working out ways to de-escalate the situation, and I felt he was in cop mode there, because any other person probably would have gotten really angry at this guy and violence may have occurred. But Ben was, I could feel he was doing, cop mode and just trying to keep the guy calm and keep himself calm. But I went up to Ben afterwards, and I knew he was not okay. And the only thing I could do, and I'm sorry, this is going to ruin your reputation, all I could do was give you a hug, because I knew it had affected you, which I think is part of being a cop. You get a lot of that kind of abuse all the time, and but you just handled it so well. And I'd never seen a situation handled like that before either, because I'm so shy and retiring and all that, but yeah. Yeah.
I think part of it was and I just tried to get him to move on. I didn't want to have the argument. I didn't want to engage in an argument. I just didn't care. And I just said, "Mate, just go and vote. Whatever you want, I don't really care. Just get out of my face." And he
Yeah.
kept on going and going and going. And in the end, I basically lost it. And I just said to him, and I said something quite graphic about an investigation I'd done in relation to a sexual assault. And I said, "You're triggering my PTSD, so fuck off." And
Well, I didn't hear him say that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
and he bolted, which was
Yeah.
lucky. And I remember you looking. I was shaking. I was actually physically shaking.
Yeah. I remember that.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah, and luckily he listened, and I think he'd realised he'd poked the bear too much.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got the breaking point.
They do.
Mine's-
And there are people out there that actually go looking for it as well. And I think he was one of those types of people. And I thought you handled it pretty well, because I had a feeling you weren't quite right. After a while, I felt like it could escalate. But yeah, you handled it well, and he left, and yeah, you got a hug.
yeah, yeah.
Bonus.
I'm not quite sure where Damo's gone, but he's
No, he's missing.
internet a bit.
Yeah.
So it's just you and I, sweetheart. This is the ordinary cop and ordinary civilian.
And it's so weird. We're actually in the same building, talking on
Yeah.
two different computers to each other. It's a bit strange.
No, but look, Damo will be back in a minute. But I think one of the other funny ones too, which happened like a couple of nights ago, that I was fast asleep. Anyway, I felt this. Miriam's tapped my leg, basically, which startled me awake. But then she's laid so still, and hasn't said anything. Anyway, I've woken up and it was a windy night, and I've seen movement in the bathroom, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh shit, there's people actually in the house." And of course, your adrenaline kicks in, and you're going, "Right, how am I going to handle this? I've got no weapons," and I was doing my risk assessments. How am I going to handle this? How am I going to deal with it? Because I know a lot of them these days, they walk in with knives and all that sort of stuff. It's still quite dark, so I need to be able to see where they are and all that sort of thing. And we sleep with a few soft toys. And anyway,
your reputation is just shot now.
well, it did, yeah, it did. But my my best way I could think was actually grabbing one of those soft toys, and I was sneaking up, and I was sneaking to the doorway, and I was ready. And my plan was I'd throw it at their head to distract them, while I basically took them out with a heavy hit, like just a one knockout. That was my plan. I just needed something to distract them so they couldn't get the knife up and stab me. And I wanted them to basically be protecting themselves when I hit them. And anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm just ready. I'm at the doorway and I can't see any movement. And you've got up and you're going, "Ben, what the hell are you doing?"
Yeah.
I just sat there and going, "Those offenders." She goes, "No, you were snoring." And I basically tapped your leg to wake you up.
And here he was skulking around with a soft toy ready to get rid of an intruder. And by the way, that was my favourite soft toy, so I would have been really mad if it got hurt. So,
so yeah, that's that's oh yeah. So Damo lost connection, everybody. So we're going to have to finish up without him.
Just before you do,
sweetheart, unless you've got anything more to add, I think.
I do actually. I've got one thing. So I think the attempted murder of my favourite soft toy is a pardonable offence, and I just want to know if your listeners agree. So let us know.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's fair. I'll pay that, Carlton. Yeah, I definitely will. Because that is, it was quite destructive of me to actually sacrifice one of your soft toys in relation to to protecting us.
Priorities.
But anyway, sweetheart, I think we might finish it up. For everybody that's listening, look, anybody that is listening to this and did go over to Christchurch, reach out to us because I know Miriam said a big thank you, but I know a lot of people in Christchurch would be very happy to hear your side of the story, and thank you for actually going over and helping during that earthquake. It always brings Miriam and her family and her friends to tears when they talk about it. So your efforts over there made a massive difference to the people of Christchurch and New Zealand. So a massive thank you to everybody that did that. And also coming up next week, we did actually have a pardonable offence for this weekend for this week, but we'll save it for next week now that Damo's been lost in the internet world.
That's also a pardonable offence.
That's right. Yeah, that's a carton, Damo. Sorry. And also next week we are lining up a few other guest speakers. One which is Keith Banks, an absolute legend, one of the first CERT officers in Queensland back in the day. I think it was the 80s, from memory. He's got a great book called Gun to the Head, and I spoke to him today. Absolutely outstanding person. We've also got a number we're lining up in relation to all the people we spoke to in relation to the Queensland Union Council a couple of weeks ago. So, and a big thank you to Miriam for basically giving me leave for a week to basically spend time with coppers and drink and then get two quite good people home late at night. So a big thank you to you. But look, everybody, reach out if you've got any questions or anything like that. Let us know. If you're in the earthquakes, let us know. Because
everybody's got a different story as well. So And if you are here in Australia, it'd be nice to, catch up and compare notes, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, in saying that, we'll see you all next week.